Bus driver Daniel Cross had never worn a badge, but 15 years behind the wheel taught him something just as sharp: how to read people. And when a man boarded with a silent little girl, something felt off. Then she looked up and whispered 3 words that changed everything. "Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and what would you have done in Daniel's place?" The Arizona sun had barely begun to settle, casting long orange streaks across the windows of Bus Route 42 as it rolled through the western edge of Phoenix. Daniel Cross sat quietly behind the wheel, sunglasses shielding his eyes, his posture relaxed yet alert. On the surface, he looked like any other weary bus driver at the end of a long shift, but behind the calm exterior lay a man with a cop's gut, a sense honed through 20 years in undercover narcotics. He wasn't just driving this route for the paycheck, it was part of his agreement with Phoenix Metro PD to keep an eye on specific zones. But tonight wasn't supposed to be one of those nights. Until she stepped on board. It happened at the Roosevelt Station stop, the kind of place where people are either getting off work or disappearing from their problems. A thin, wiry man boarded first, tugging along a girl no older than 7. Her oversized hoodie swallowed her frame, sleeves dragging nearly to her knees. Her blonde hair was a mess, not the playful tangle of a carefree child, but the dull kind that came from neglect. What made Daniel's hand subtly tighten on the steering wheel wasn't the girl's appearance, it was her eyes. They were searching, darting, but not at the bus, not at the man with her. They looked past people, through windows, scanning as if searching for someone, anyone, who might notice. The man sat to the far back, almost possessively, his arms stretched unnaturally wide across the backrest. Not protectively, territorially. His leg bounced, his eyes scanned the front mirror. Daniel didn't react. He shifted the bus back into gear and pulled away from the stop as if nothing had changed. But his focus had narrowed. There was something wrong, he could feel it. A tingle at the base of his neck that had saved his life more times than he could count. He adjusted the rearview mirror slowly, catching brief glimpses of the girl. Her head was bowed low, hands clenched into tiny fists in her lap. She flinched when the man leaned over and whispered something to her. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he didn't need to. The body language told the story, rehearsed control, not affection. Traffic was light as the bus glided through West Van Buren Street. A siren howled in the distance. Daniel flipped on the intercom and made the usual announcement. "Next stop, Jefferson and 5th. Please remain seated." His voice was even, casual, but his mind was racing. Was this a domestic dispute? A runaway? Or something worse? Then the girl shifted slightly, just enough to make her hood fall back an inch. Daniel saw her face more clearly. There was something off. Her cheeks were pale, her lips dry, but it was her stomach that held his attention. Under the thick fabric, it bulged, not like the roundness of a well-fed child, but hard, unnatural, like something pressing out from inside. He squinted. Maybe it was a medical condition, or maybe it wasn't. He turned the corner at Monroe Avenue and slowed slightly at the next red light. The city around him carried on in oblivious motion, lovers on scooters, kids on skateboards, street vendors closing for the day, and in the middle of it all, that girl. Still, quiet, unmoving. As the light turned green, a sharp voice buzzed in his earpiece, "Phoenix PD dispatch. Amber Alert update. Suspect, male, late 30s, 5'10", thin build. Victim, female child, 7 years old, last seen in gray hoodie, believed to be in downtown transit corridor." Daniel's heart didn't race. It tightened. The image was now too clear. He didn't react, didn't slam on the brakes or call attention. Instead, he slowly veered toward the right lane. He had to be certain. He couldn't risk tipping the man off too early. Not if the girl was in danger. Not if that strange bulge in her hoodie was something more than just bizarre. He made eye contact with her once through the mirror. It was fleeting, but he swore she saw him. Not as a stranger, not as a driver, but as something she'd been hoping for. Her lips parted slightly. She leaned forward, and then, barely a boy to boist to the cattle of city noise, she whispered 3 words. "Don't wake it." Daniel's hands gripped the wheel tighter. What the hell did that mean? He glanced again. Her eyes were locked on him now, wide and terrified, but with a strange calm beneath the panic, like she knew something he didn't. like she had accepted it. He kept driving, but inside everything shifted. Don't wake it. Not help me. Not he took me. No name, no cry, just a warning. And in that moment, Daniel Cross understood he wasn't just witnessing a kidnapping. He might be sitting in the middle of something he couldn't yet explain. Daniel's mind was moving faster than the bus itself, analyzing, recalculating, predicting outcomes like a chess player seeing 12 moves ahead. The words "don't wake it" still echoed inside his skull as the confirmation came through his earpiece. The Amber Alert matched everything. Girl, 7 years old, oversized hoodie, stole another glance through the mirror. The man's leg was bouncing rapidly now. His hands were clenching and unclenching as though his skin itched with invisible fire. Mira, the girl, was still, but her stillness wasn't from fear. It was like she was concentrating. Like she knew something far more dangerous than this man sat quietly beneath the surface. Daniel's mouth felt dry. His heart didn't pound, not yet. That would come later. Right now, he needed to get her off this bus, but not in panic. If this man was holding Mira against her will and sensed he was cornered, anything could happen. Daniel had seen it before. Desperate men did desperate things. He reached down and flicked a small toggle under the console, an old feature from his undercover days. It pinged the PD, triggering a silent alert to the closest unit in a 5-break radius. It bought him maybe 7 minutes. He needed to stretch it to 10. He thumbed the intercom switch. "Attention passengers," he said with practiced ease, voice cool and monotone. "Due to a mechanical sensor warning, we'll be making a brief unscheduled stop near the city inspection checkpoint. Shouldn't take more than 5 minutes." There were a few groans from tired commuters, but no panic. That was good. The man in the back didn't react, at least not on the outside, but Daniel caught the sudden freeze in his bouncing knee, the way his hand suddenly shifted toward the pocket of his hoodie. Noted. As the bus approached 5th and Jackson, Daniel eased it to the curb near a service lane instead of a designated stop. No one got up. He kept his eyes on the mirror. Slowly, he stood, adjusting his vest beneath Jackson's jacket, and walked the aisle, pretending to check under seats and floor compartments. He was 6 rows away. Mira turned her head. For the first time since she'd boarded, she made deliberate eye contact with him. Her irises were a haunting shade of gray mule, and they didn't blink. She wasn't scared of him. In fact, her gaze felt familiar, intimate. Daniel's steps faltered for half a breath, but he kept walking. 4 rows away now, the man shifted in his seat, eyes darting up, then down. Mira looked straight at Daniel. Her lips didn't move, but he heard it somehow, maybe through instinct, maybe through madness. Or maybe she actually said it, "You've been here before." He blinked. Mira leaned forward. This time her voice was audible, soft but firm. "You were in my dream," she said. "You wore this jacket, you stood right there, and you said my name." Daniel stopped cold. There was no way, no chance. It wasn't just the words. It was the way she said them, with a certainty that stripped away the veneer of coincidence. He opened his mouth to speak, but Mira's eyes flicked sideways. The man beside her was watching now. Mira's fingers twitched once. It was a signal. He knew it like muscle memory. Daniel took one last step and bent slightly, feigning interest beneath the seat in front of them. "Inspection," he said lightly. "Just routine." "We didn't leave anything," the man said, his voice hoarse and dry. He was trying to sound casual, but Daniel heard the grin that didn't reach his eyes, for the man hesitated. "I don't see the point," he muttered. Mira was frozen now, hands tight in her lap. Her voice, even softer, reached him. "If he runs, it wakes up." Daniel turned toward her, pretending to search under the seat, hiding his expression. "What wakes up?" he replied. "They said if I scream, it will start moving. If I move wrong, it hurts. But you can stop it. That's why I saw you." Daniel's chest tightened. His mind raced through every scenario. Medical device, implanted tracker, something worse, but none of it explained the calm terror in her tone, the way she spoke like someone used to obeying, just to survive. "What's your name?" he asked. "Mira," she answered. The man beside her stood suddenly. "We're leaving," he said sharply. "I don't care about your inspection." Daniel straightened. "Sorry, sir," he said, calm but firm. "We've got to wait for clearance." The man's eyes burned with something dark, Resentment, fear, maybe desperation. "You don't have any authority," he spat. "We're not staying." Daniel's hand hovered near his belt, not for a weapon, but for the panic button beneath his shirt. Another second, just a little longer, and Mira stood too, but only halfway. She looked up at Daniel and whispered again. "If it wakes up, it sends a signal." Then the others come. "What others?" he asked quietly. "They're already listening," she said, "but if it wakes, they follow." Daniel made a decision in that moment, not based on logic, not based on training, but something primal. This wasn't just a rescue, this was something bigger. And she wasn't just a victim, she was a warning wrapped in skin and silence. He looked at Mira and said what he hadn't planned to say. "I saw you too, but it wasn't a dream." Her eyes flickered with something, relief or recognition, he couldn't tell. But in that tiny shift, he knew she believed him. And that meant Daniel didn't get another chance to speak because the man moved suddenly, a sharp flick of the wrist that sent the hem of his jacket flying back as a glint of steel caught the overhead light. The blade wasn't large, but it was enough, rusted along the edge, serraled like a fishing knife, meant for damage, not intimidation. It emerged from the man's palm like an extension of something darker. Some gasped, others ducked instinctively. Mira didn't scream. She just tensed, her hands forming tiny fists against her chest as her eyes locked with Daniel's in silent desperation. The man pointed the blade toward Daniel, but his other hand grabbed Mira's wrist, yanking her back behind him like a shield. "Open the doors," he hissed. Daniel didn't raise his hands, didn't move toward the panic button, didn't show fear. His body was still, but his mind raced like wildfire. There was no time for negotiation, no SWAT, no hostage team, no perimeter. It was him, the man, the knife, and the girl. His right foot shifted ever so slightly, angling his weight for leverage. "You don't want to do this," Daniel said slowly. "You hurt her, and whatever you're running from gets worse." The man's eyes twitched. "You think I'm scared of you?" he sneered. "You don't understand. She's not a child. She's a trigger." Daniel's stomach dropped. In that moment, Mira's voice broke through like a thread in a storm. "It's waking up," she whispered. That was it. That was the moment. Daniel struck. One practiced motion, right hand grabbing the man's wrist, right elbow slamming upward into his chin. The blade clattered to the floor as the man stumbled, releasing Mira just long enough for Daniel to yank her free. He pushed her behind him and turned back just as the man lunged again, wild now, fueled by panic more than skill. Daniel sidestepped, catching the man's collar, spinning him and slamming him face first into the steel pole of the bus. The impact echoed through the vehicle. The man collapsed, groaning, dazed but alive. Mira stood frozen near the front row, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "You okay?" Daniel asked, breath short. She nodded once. Sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights splashed through the windows. Backup had arrived. Doors swung open, and 2 uniformed officers stormed in, weapons drawn. Daniel raised a hand. "He's down. Secure him. She comes with me." There was no time for questions. His badge was enough. He scooped Mira up into his arms. She didn't resist. As they stepped off the bus, the air outside hit them like a wave of reality, humid, electric, as if the atmosphere itself had shifted. EMTs rushed forward, but Daniel waved them off. "Straight to St. Luke's, trauma unit, now." Mira's pulse was faint against his neck. She trembled in his arms, but her voice was still eerily calm. "It's not done," she whispered. "They're still listening." At the hospital, everything moved in a blur, nurses shouting, doctors moving like a hive, scanning, prepping, questioning. Daniel never left her side. He stayed near her gurney, ignoring the protests, insisting with authority carved from steel that he was staying. Finally, an X-ray technician wheeled her into imaging. Daniel stood behind the glass with a trauma nurse named Kara, who muttered under her breath as the scans lit up the screen. "Jesus," she whispered. There it was. Not a tumor, not a growth, not scar tissue, but something metal embedded deep in Mira's abdomen. Oval, maybe 2 inches long, with irregular ridges and soft edges, like it had been molded to fit her specifically. Around it, the tissue was inflamed, raw. The screen flickered. Kara adjusted the controls. There's a secondary signal, she said, brow furrowing. Like radio interference? Tanner leaned closer. Not local, no civilian frequency. Wait. She clicked on a frequency isolation tool. The signal popped up again, then again, stronger this time. It's transmitting, she said slowly. That's not noise, that's output. To where? Daniel asked. Kara's face went pale. Up? Daniel's breath hitched. Like satellite? Higher, she said. Too high for weather balloons or drones. This thing's broadcasting into the stratosphere. Daniel stared at the screen, then at Mira, who lay still under the scanning unit. What the hell is it sending? Kara shook her head. I don't know, but whatever it is, something out there is probably receiving it. He stepped into the imaging room. Mira opened her eye. I told you, she said softly. If it wakes up, they find me. Daniel crouched beside her. We're going to stop it, Mira, but I need to know, who are they? She closed her eyes. They don't have names, she murmured. Only numbers. Numbers? He echoed. Like serials, like countdowns, she said. I'm number 7. Daniel stood slowly. Every hair on his arms rising. The girl wasn't just a hostage. She wasn't just trafficked. She was part of something constructed, calculated, and now broadcasting. Outside, clouds rolled in fast, unnatural. One of the nurses checked her radio. Static on all channels, she mumbled. Never seen this kind of interference before. Daniel looked back at the screen. The signal strength climbed again, 84%, 92%. The signal climbed steadily, unrelenting, each percentage increase pressing heavier on Daniel's chest than the last. 96%, 97%, 98%. Then suddenly, it froze at 99%. A long, high-pitched whine buzzed through the hospital's intercom system. Static followed, then silence. Mira's eyes fluttered open. She didn't scream, didn't flinch. She only whispered, "He's coming." Before Daniel could ask who she meant, the doors to the radiology wing burst open, and in strode a tall woman in a sleek black blazer, her ID badge swinging from a lanyard as she walked with purpose. "Daniel Cross," she called out, her voice crisp, authoritative. "We need to talk." Daniel turned, instinctively stepping in front of Mira's gurney, shielding her. "What's going on?" he asked. Clara's eyes scanned the room, taking in the X-rays, the frozen monitors, the wide-eyed techs. "I need everyone out, now," she said. Within seconds, the room cleared, leaving only Daniel, Mira, and Clara. She motioned toward the screen. "That's not from Earth, is it?" Daniel remained silent. Clara stepped closer, keeping her tone steady but urgent. "We've been tracking this frequency for 3 months. It activated last night. We thought it was dormant tech, debris from an old surveillance satellite, but now it's coming from inside a 7-year-old girl." "Mira," Daniel said. "Her name is Mira." Clara nodded. He snapped his knuckles before settling on the simple, "But she's the only one still alive." Daniel stiffened. "What do you mean?" Clara glanced at the door, then back at him. There were 6 others, similar implants, similar profiles. All disappeared or missing. "We believe you're involved, Mr. Cross." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I've never seen anything like this until tonight." "You have," Clara said softly. "You just don't remember?" That sentence hit Daniel like a blow to the chest. "What are you talking about?" Clara pulled out a tablet, flicking through files, then turned it toward him. On the screen was a blurry photo, young man in combat gear standing beside a lab van, a child in his arms. "That's you," she said. "Operation Orpheus classified trial in Nevada desert. 10 years ago?" "That's not possible," Daniel said, but something in the back of his mind stirred. A shadow behind the fog, Clara continued. "You were part of a memory suppression experiment tied to behavioral compliance. You and 9 others underwent voluntary trials, but after the last subject died, the project went black. Your records were sealed. You were discharged, reassigned to Phoenix under false credentials?" "You're saying my whole career since then was orchestrated." Clara finished. "He'd only discovered it because the frequency Mira's device uses matches one of your neurological biosignatures from the Orpheus files." Daniel stepped back, his mind reeling. "You're saying this thing, Insider, is responding to me?" Clara nodded. "Not just responding, you're the only one who can trigger it. Your proximity, your voice, your neural patterns, it's designed to recognize them Mira, still pale on the gurney, opened her eyes again. "I knew it," she said faintly. "That's why I saw you." Clara turned toward her. "You saw him?" Mira nodded. "In dreams, in flashbacks. Sometimes I feel what he feels." Daniel felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with fear. It was like pieces of him, broken, buried pieces, were being forced back into place. "Why me?" he asked. Clara stared at the screen. Others think Mira is the final product. The others failed, rejected the device, bled out, or worse. But she stabilized. You're the key to whatever's inside her. That's why she found you, why she was brought into your bus route. None of this is coincidence. Daniel shook his head, overwhelmed. "And the signal?" "We traced it as far as we could," Clara said. "It's not going to a satellite. It's going beyond Earth's magnetosphere, into deep space. Whatever's out there, it's listening." Mira tugged gently at Daniel's sleeve. "I think I was made to bring them here," she said. "But if you help me, I can stop it." Daniel crouched down, meeting her eye level. "How do you know that?" Mira placed her tiny hand over her chest. "Because you're the only one who doesn't make it hurt." Clara cleared her throat, then handed Daniel a small device, a neuroscanner. "We need to sync you to the implant, see how strong the connection is. But if the link is what we think it is, we may only have hours before whatever's on the other end locks on." Daniel looked down at the scanner, then back at Mira, the child who wasn't just a child, the man who wasn't just a man, a puzzle piece missing from both of them. He took the scanner and placed it against his temple. The machine beeped, lights blinking in sequence, then turned green. "Neuroresonance 100% match," Clara said. "God help us, it's him." A deep rumble shook the hospital floor. Lights flickered again. Outside, a low-pitched hum began to vibrate through the air, barely perceptible, but growing stronger by the second. Daniel looked at Clara. "What now?" She glanced toward the door. "Now we find out what they want." The hum intensified. Mira reached for Daniel's hand. "They're getting closer." Daniel turned to Clara, his eyes hardened by something new. Not fear, resolve. "Then we stop running." She nodded once. "Let's move, we've got work to do." But as the ground trembled again and the hospital alarms began to wail, none of them saw the figures moving in the security cameras at the edge of the screen, stepping out of sleek black vehicles with perfect precision. The tremors didn't stop, not fully. Even as the alarms blared and staff scrambled to follow evacuation protocols, something unnatural pressed against the walls of the hospital, not with force, but with presence. Daniel, Mira, and Agent Clara Novak moved quickly, ducking into an unused surgical prep room as the lights continued to flicker above them. Clara bolted the door behind her, scanning the hallway for movement, while Daniel helped Mira into a chair, her small body trembling with a mix of exhaustion and something deeper. "They're almost here," she said again, her voice barely above a breath. "But you have to know who I am first." Daniel crouched beside her, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. "I know who you are. You're Mira." She shook her head slowly, her hair falling into her eyes. "That's the name they gave me, the one they used when they moved me from base to base. But that's not my name. I was called Aurea 7. The seventh attempt attached to its name of Clara turned toward her sharply. "Aurea? That's a designation from the Orpheus files. We thought it was a myth. No documentation ever confirmed survivability beyond Aurea 3. "There were 7 of us," Mira whispered. "All born in the same year, from different mothers, but all made. We weren't natural. We were grown from what they called source DNA, bits and pieces of soldiers, scientists, even operatives who never gave consent." Daniel felt something sharp twist in his gut. Mira continued, eyes distant now, her voice soft and rhythmic, like someone remembering a lullaby they didn't want to. Aurea 1 could light fires with her mind when she cried. Aurea 2 stopped breathing, but never died. Aurea 3 screamed in numbers. She only spoke in sequences. Aurea 4, he went blind, but he always saw things before they happened. Aurea 5 had no heartbeat for a whole day once. They said her silence broke the sensors. Aurea 6 disappeared. Not ran away, disappeared. Gone one night. Mira looked up at Daniel, her eyes no longer frightened, but ancient. Then there was me. Aurea 7, the one they didn't expect to survive. But I did. Because of you? Daniel blinked. Me? Mira nodded. When I was first born, before the surgeries, before they put the sigil inside, they showed me a picture of a man, a soldier with kind eyes who held me when the others couldn't. I screamed until they brought him back. They didn't know why, but I did. Daniel's throat felt dry, and a memory long buried surged forward, uninvited, unstoppable. A room, cold, white, humming with machines. A basin. A baby, not crying, not squirming, just staring. A tiny tag on the crib, Aurea 7. Below that, handwritten in faint ink. I knew it, Mira whispered, watching his face. You remember now. Daniel nodded slowly as realization bloomed behind his eyes. I wasn't supposed to hold you, he murmured, but I couldn't walk away. Claire watched them both, stunned into silence. She reached for her device, tapping through security access files. You were the handler for Aurea 7, she said to Daniel. You weren't just part of the trial. You were her guardian during the early stage development. You had direct contact for 6 weeks before the ethics board tried to shut it all down. Mira exhaled softly, a sound like surrender and triumph wrapped into one. They wiped you clean after that, but the link, it never broke. That's why I found you again. Not by accident. You were always the end point. Daniel sat back on his heels. They lied to both of us, Clara interrupted, her voice more cautious now. It may not be all. I've been digging deeper into the activation sequence. This device inside her, it's not just a transmitter. It's a receiver, too. It responds to you, Daniel. You were the failsafe, the final override. What does that mean? Daniel asked. It means if she ever went out of control, Clara said grimly, your body, your neural activity could shut her down. Permanently. Mira didn't flinch. They built me as a warning and a weapon. They feared I'd evolve like the others. But they built me with a lock you... Daniel's hands clenched. I would never let anyone use you like that. You didn't know, Mira said simply. But now you do, and now they know we're together again. Clara looked out the small window of the prep room, her face pale. They're surrounding the hospital. Not law enforcement, not medical, suits, military-grade transport. Whatever this is, it just escalated. Daniel turned to Mira. We're not giving you back to them. We'll find a way out. Mira's gaze held his, steady and solemn. If we leave, they follow, but if we stay, they activate the others. Daniel's heart skipped. The others? You said the others were gone. Mira looked down at her hands. They were, but they saved pieces, DNA, data. If they can't use me, they'll try again. With what's left, Clara swore under her breath. Move now. Daniel lifted Mira into his arms, her body light but charged with something unexplainable. He looked at Clara. Where's the safest place in this building? There isn't one, she said, her voice low, but there might be a way through the tunnels. The hospital shook again, dust raining from the ceiling. Down the hallway, voices spoke in unison, flat, synthetic, synchronous. Daniel didn't need to hear what they were saying. He already knew. They were calling for Aurea 7, and they weren't asking. The walls trembled again, as if the very foundation of the hospital could sense what was drawing near, and from deep within the emergency corridor, a sound began to rise. Not a siren, not footsteps, but something more unnatural, a synchronized rhythm of movement, like the hum of an approaching machine. Daniel adjusted his grip on Mira, who had grown unnervingly quiet. Her small arms looped around his neck as he carried her down the hallway behind Clara, whose ID badge now acted more like a talisman than real authority. They turned a corner and skidded to a halt as a wave of motion passed the opposite end of the corridor. 5 figures in seamless black suits, faces unreadable, each step perfectly timed with the others. That's them, Clara whispered, reaching for her firearm instinctively. Noah's agents, private government security, operate outside conventional jurisdiction. Daniel narrowed his eyes, his instincts roaring. They don't look like security. They're not, she said. Their assets, human once, now something in Earth. Mira stirred against him, murmuring faintly. They're the failed ones, the ones they tried to fix after us. Clara pulled them into a side stairwell, slamming the heavy door shut behind them. "We need to get to the sublevel. There's a secure surgical suite, barely used. It has lead shielding, might buy us time." As they descended, Mira tensed suddenly in Daniel's arms, her breath catching in her throat. "Daniel, it's happening." He stopped on the landing. "What is?" She clutched her stomach, sweat beating across her forefort. "The signal. It's not just transmitting anymore. It's growing." Clara looked back up from the lower stairwell. "What do you mean, growing?" Mira winced, her voice trembling. "It's duplicating. Inside me." Daniel shifted her carefully into a seated position on the stairs as Clara checked her vitals. Her pulse was erratic, her skin clammy. "Her abdomen's distending," Clara said, pulling out a penlight and scanning Mira's pupils. "There's pressure building. If this keeps up, her organs will be compromised." "They put a replicator in her," Daniel muttered, horrified. "Biotech seeded with growth instructions, like a virus." Claire looked up, her face hard. "If we don't remove it now, she'll die." "Not in hours, in minutes." Mira gritted her teeth, tears streaking down her cheeks as she tried not to scream. "Designed it to self-protect, in case I tried to run." "Is there an OR in the sub-level?" Daniel asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, but we're going to need full sedation and sterile setup. It's not like removing a tumor. We don't know what the hell we're dealing with." "Then we improvise," Daniel said, lifting Mira again despite her cries of pain. "We get to that OR and we cut it out." They burst through the sub-level door into a dimly lit corridor lined with maintenance closets and backup power conduits. Emergency lights painted the walls red as the hume from above deepened into a mechanical throb. Clara scanned her fingerprint at a security pad, and the steel door hissed open, revealing a long, unused surgical suite. Daniel laid Mira on the operating table while Clara pulled supplies from cabinets, scalp skulls, clamps, a portable monitor. "I'm not a surgeon," she said, voice shaking but hands steady. "But I've done combat field extraction." "Do it," Daniel said. "Whatever it takes." Mira whimpered, curling on her side as a tremor ran through her entire body. "It's not just Mira," she gasped. "It's—" The screen beside her flickered to life on its own, biometric data pouring in without being connected. Symbols scrolled across in an alien cadence, shapes that pulsed like code, but not in any language Daniel or Claire had ever seen. "It's syncing to the building's systems," Claire realized. "It's trying to upload something. Maybe itself." "Cut it out before it finishes," Daniel barked. "Now." Clara pressed a mask over Mira's face and administered sedation from an emergency kit, whispering gently as the girl fought to stay conscious. "You're going to sleep for just a little while. When you wake up, this thing won't be part of you anymore." Mira looked at Daniel one last time, her voice fragile. "If I don't make it, don't let them use me again." Daniel squeezed her hand. "You're going to make it. I'm not losing you." Her eyes fluttered shut. Clara sterilized her gloves, snapped on a pair of goggles, and made the first incision. Daniel watched, heart pounding, as blood welled around the scalpel. The tissue was already inflamed, pushing back unnaturally, as if resisting the blade. "It's defending itself," Clara said. "This isn't just biotech, it's bioreactive. It's trying to integrate with her organs." Mira's body jerked slightly under sedation. The screen next to them began flashing erratically. Then, silence. The entire room fell dead quiet. "Why did everything stop?" Daniel asked. "That's not good," Clara replied. "It's not dead, it's listening." Above them, through layers of concrete and steel, they heard footsteps, synchronized, inhuman. Closer. Clara worked faster, her fingers slick with blood and sweat. "I see it. God, Daniel, it's not just metal, it's got neural tissue. They grew this thing to think." "Can you extract it?" "Maybe," she said, "but if it's wired into her spine, we risk paralysis. I need one more minute." Daniel stepped back to the door, his weapon drawn. Through the narrow reinforced window, he saw shadows shifting in the hallway. Black suits, pale faces, eyes that didn't blink. "They found us," he said, "and they're not knocking." Claire didn't look up. "Then stall them, because if I make one mistake, she dies." Daniel squared his shoulders, heart racing, pulse sinking to the growing thump in the walls. Knowing what came next wasn't about holding the line. It was about surviving just long enough to let Mira wake up. Clara's hands moved with precision, born not from training, but from necessity. Each motion careful, deliberate, as she separated the last layer of tissue around the foreign object embedded in Mira's abdomen. And there it was, small, metallic, slick with biofluids, pulsing faintly with a dim violet glow. Nestled against a bundle of nerves like a parasite that had learned how to mimic its host. "It's alive," she whispered, her voice cracking as she gently eased the scalpel underneath, careful not to slice too deep, knowing one wrong move would rupture something unknown, something possibly explosive. Daniel stood frozen at the threshold, gun drawn toward the door that now thumped with quiet, calculated force from the other side, the rhythmic impact of heavy boots that weren't meant to run but to reclaim. "Clara," he said, his voice strained. "How much longer?" 10 seconds, she replied, sweat running down her temple as she slid the extractor tool beneath the object. "Nor more. If it's fused deeper than this, we lose her." The device pulsed again, brighter this time, as if sensing extraction. Then, with a final tug and a nauseating suction sound, it dislodged, rising slowly out of the incision like it didn't want to be touched. "Got it," Clara breathed, dropping it into a sterilized container. But before she could seal the lid, the device floated. It didn't fall. It didn't land. It hovered above the tray, humming now, with a sound that wasn't mechanical, wasn't human, a frequency that vibrated through the walls, through their skin, through every molecule in the room. "What the hell?" Clara stepped back, her eyes wide. The object, a sphere no larger than a walnut, began to spin, rotating on its axis with no visible propulsion. Then it emitted a pulse, silent, invisible. But Clara's monitor screens flickered, Daniel's radio screeched with static, and the overhead lights blinked out. In another room of the hospital, a vending machine began to spit cans violently onto the floor. The entire building groaned, as if reacting to something it could no longer ignore. "Broadcasting," Clara said, stunned. "It's not just transmitting anymore, it's mapping. Globally." Daniel stepped forward, gun still in hand, but he knew shooting it wouldn't matter. The device was beyond that. Mira gasped on the table, her eyes fluttering, her skin pale, blood pooling beneath her like a spreading shadow. "She's crashing," Clara snapped, grabbing gauze and pressure pads, her hands pressing into the wound to slow the hemorrhaging. "Heart rate's dropping. We need transfusion, now." "We don't have time," Daniel said, dropping to his knees beside Mira. Her body trembled under the weight of everything it had endured, her small hands twitching, her lips slightly parted as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Claire checked the monitor, flatlining. "She's coding," she said, reaching for the defibrillator. "No," Daniel said, placing his hand gently on Mira's chest, directly over the wound. "No paddles. Just give me a second." Clara froze. "Daniel, trust me," he whispered. And then he closed his eyes. He didn't know what he was doing, not consciously. He didn't understand how or why, but something inside him, a current, a pull, drew out from his palm into her chest, like a silent frequency seeking resonance. Under his hand, the skin grew warm, not burning, not unnatural, just alive. The floating orb above them pulsed in response, its rotation slowing. Then it stopped vibrating altogether. The light steadied, the monitors came back online. Mira inhaled, a ragged, shallow breath, but real. Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then locked onto Daniel's. "You stopped it," she whispered. "You made it stop." Daniel felt tears sting his eyes, a rare raw thing he hadn't known he could still feel. "You're okay," he murmured. "You're safe now." But the device, now inert, still hovered, spinning slower, yet somehow more dangerous in its stillness. Clara stepped forward cautiously, scanning it with a portable meter. "It's gone quiet," she said. But the signal, it was global. Every satellite, every defense system, every surveillance grid, it just pinged the same source. Daniel stood slowly, placing himself between the sphere and Mira. "Then we need to move before something answers." Clara nodded grimly. "They will." That pulse, it was a beacon. Outside the door, the thumping had stopped, too suddenly. Daniel felt his skin prickle. "They're not trying to breach anymore." "No," Clara said. "They're waiting, watching." Mira sat up slowly, bloodied but conscious, her voice hoarse. "It sent the final signal, the one they were waiting for." Daniel turned to her, hand still trembling from the resonance. "What was it?" Mira looked down, her voice barely audible. It wasn't a message. She looked up at him, eyes wide with dread. It was a countdown, and somewhere above, the skies began to change. The silence that followed Mira's final words, "It was a countdown," hung like a storm cloud ready to break, thick and ominous, the kind that made every breath feel borrowed. Daniel stood frozen beside her, hand still faintly tingling from the contact from whatever had passed between them when he stopped the orb's pulse. Clara didn't. She moved quickly across the operating room, retrieving her tablet from the far counter where she had synced into the Noesis network earlier, fingers flying across the screen as she accessed encrypted archives she'd only ever heard about in whispered rumors. "We need to know what that signal activated," she muttered, eyes scanning line after line of data until she found it, buried beneath layers of redacted protocols, a sequence titled Project Aurea Master Genome Schematic. She tapped in her credentials, then a secondary effort to convey simply to document. Then she sank against it, had access to, but did anyway. The screen flickered, decrypted, and opened to a DNA sequence. Not just one. 4. Clara's breath caught in her throat. "Oh my God," she whispered. "This isn't just an implant project. Mira wasn't just a carrier, she was grown." Daniel turned sharply. "What do you mean grown?" Clara zoomed in, overlaying the genome maps. "She wasn't born in any natural sense. She was synthesized. A hybrid embryo built from the DNA of 4 combat-proven subjects pulled from elite black spokes." "That's not possible." Clara's voice was steady, but the weight in it was undeniable. "The file is clear. You were part of a pre-consent genetic screening initiative during your first enlistment. They harvested the samples. Years later, they used your neural profile as the foundation. You weren't just her handler, you're part of her biologically." Mira looked between them, a strange calm on her face. "I always felt it. That's why your voice reaches me when nothing else can." Daniel couldn't speak. He remembered flashes, unexplainable dreams, instincts that didn't belong to him, like his mind had always been half open to another frequency. And now he knew why. Before the silence could settle again, the reinforced door hissed open on its own, without a knock, without a key. They turned as a figure stepped through, flanked by 2 black-clad agents who didn't speak, didn't blink, didn't even breathe audibly. The man was tall, immaculately dressed in charcoal gray, eyes cold yet oddly serene. "Mr. Solomon?" Claire said, her voice laced with venom. "I should have guessed." Solomon smiled faintly, his hands clasped behind his back. "You always were the curious one, Agent Novak, too smart to follow orders, too stubborn to quit." "Cut the pleasantries," Daniel snapped. "What the hell is Mira?" Solomon turned his gaze on Daniel, and for a moment something passed behind his eyes. Respect, perhaps, or regret. "She's the answer, Officer Cross. Or the ending. That part remains unwritten." "What are you talking about?" Clara demanded. Solomon stepped forward, the orb still hovering silently behind him, as if drawn by some unspoken command. "Humanity reached its ceiling a long time ago," he said, voice calm and deliberate. "War, decay, division, evolution has stalled. We needed a leap forward, not a new weapon, not another soldier, but a convergence. Mira was never designed to destroy. She was designed to reset." "Reset?" Daniel echoed. "What does that even mean?" Solomon turned toward Mira now, his expression softening. Her mind isn't just hers. It's a synthesis, instinct, logic, memory, empathy, aggression, all wrapped in an organic interface that can manipulate frequencies beyond anything we've created. She can broadcast thought, reweight behavior, influence at a scale we haven't begun to comprehend. "You built her to control people. Or liberate them?" Solomon replied. "Depends on who holds the key. That's why we paired her with a counterseed, Daniel, a natural inhibitor, a safety valve. If she ever reached full activation prematurely, he could suppress it." "And now?" Daniel asked. Solomon's eyes narrowed. "Now she's awake, and so is the network. The signal she released, it didn't just notify us. It activated the others." "What others?" Clara asked. Solomon's smile faded. "Every synthetic embryo we couldn't grow, every neural matrix we couldn't house. They were stored digitally. The signal was a retrieval command, They're coming back. Mira's hand tightened around Daniel's. He's right, she said softly. Told them, wake up, but they're not like me. Solomon nodded. No, they lack what you have, conscious integration. Without it, they're volatile, incomplete, but if they reach you, they'll try to overwrite you, become you. Like a hive, Claire realized. She's the queen's cell. Precisely, Solomon said. That's why you must come with us, Mira. You're not safe out here, neither are they. Mira looked up at Daniel. I don't want to be the end of the world. Daniel knelt beside her. Then we won't let you. We'll write something else. Solomon watched them, then slowly extended his hand. The clock's ticking. Every minute you delay, the field strengthens. When they arrive, there may be no stopping them, unless we contain you now. Mira looked at the orb, silent, waiting. Then at the man who shared her blood. What do I do, Daniel? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Daniel stood slowly, turning to face Solomon. You're not taking her anywhere. Solomon's expression didn't change, but the room felt colder. Then you better be ready, he said, because what's coming doesn't negotiate. They didn't wait. The moment Solomon's warning hung heavy in the air, Daniel grabbed Mira, Clara secured the data core from the OR terminal, and together they vanished into the sublevel tunnels of the hospital as alarms began to blare in a sequence Daniel had never heard before. 3 long pulses, followed by silence, then again. It wasn't a medical emergency, it was lockdown protocol. Across the city, systems flickered. Surveillance cameras panned unnaturally fast. Drones in the sky paused in midair and adjusted direction. It wasn't a manhunt, it was a retrieval operation. The city itself had become a net. We have to get her out of range, Clara said as they ducked into a disused maintenance corridor. Every camera, traffic light, and radio tower is bouncing a frequency that's syncing with the sphere. They're not tracking her by GPS, they're tracking her by resonance. How far do we have to go? Daniel asked, breath sharp, Mira limp in his arms. Farther than this, Clara muttered, pulling up an old operations map. There's a dead zone outside Barrow Ridge, 32 miles east. The mountains block the signal. If we can get her there, we can mask her long enough to reset everything. Reset? Daniel asked. You mean shut her down? I mean give her a choice, Clara said. The only one she's never been allowed to make. They surfaced through a side gate of the hospital's emergency bay. The parking lot was already swarmed by black SUVs, drones circling overhead, but Claire had planned for that. A utility van parked across the street, unmarked, rusted, anonymous, opened as she pressed a key fob. Move, she ordered. Daniel slid Mira into the back, Clara jumped behind the wheel, and they peeled into the night. Behind them, the first of the synthetic agents emerged, heads tilting in unison as their prey vanished from the grid for 0.7 seconds before reappearing on 3 separate trackers. They're not following roads, Clara said, glancing at the dashboard feed. They're using the data stream. Wherever signal flows, they follow. Mira stirred. Her eyes opened slowly. They're already inside, she whispered. Everywhere. They're waking up all over the grid. Daniel gripped the seat, his heart pounding. We'll make it, just hold on. But as the van raced along the freeway, shadows moved at unnatural speeds in the distance. Roads closed behind them. Overpasses blacked out. Gas stations flickered and dimmed. In every corner of the city, systems failed in sequence, and in their place came the low, rising hum of the signal Mira had once suppressed. We're not going to make it, she said softly, more to herself than them. Not if I keep running. Daniel turned toward her. What are you talking about? Mira looked up at him, her eyes full of something deeper than fear. Resolve. They don't want me. They want what's inside me. If I end the signal, the sphere stops responding. If I stop responding, they stop chasing. No, Daniel said firmly. There's another way. There's not, Mira said, voice shaking but steady. This was always how it was going to end. I was the beacon. But I can also be the firewall. You're just a child, Clara said, her voice tight. You shouldn't have to make this choice. Mira nodded slowly. But I'm the only one who can. She reached into her jacket and pulled the sphere from the containment pouch. It glowed faintly now, not with threat, but with recognition. If I sink fully, she whispered, and then burn the source, no one can rebuild it. Daniel grabbed her hand. You won't survive that. Maybe not, she said, but no one else will die for me. The van jerked violently as an EMP blast struck a transformer ahead, the road lighting up in arcs of blue. Clara swerved hard, tires shrieking, engine rattling as it fought against the pulse. "We're losing everything," she shouted. "I've got maybe 1 more mile before we're dead in the water." Mira clutched the sphere tightly and looked out the window. "Then this is where I end it." "Don't," Daniel said. "There was a way," Mira smiled faintly. "There was. And you were it." Before he could stop, it lifted from her palm, spinning faster than before, light strobing across its surface like a dying star. "This is my choice," she said. "Tell them I wasn't a weapon. I was a warning." Daniel didn't think. He simply moved, cutting through the searing brightness as the sphere ascended from Mira's trembling hands. Its light, burning like the sun in miniature, pulsing faster with every beat of her small heart that threatened to stop from sheer overload. And he reached her just as the sphere's frequency began to spike toward critical. He wrapped his arms around her, shielding her body with his own, pressing her head into his chest as if his embrace could block out the impending detonation, and in a voice steady but full of something primal and unbreakable, he whispered, "You don't die for them, Mira, not today, not ever. If you are the hope of mankind, then we live. We fight, we heal, and we live." Mira tried to protest, her breath shallow, her skin feverish, but Daniel's grip didn't waver, and something shifted in that moment, deep in the coating of the sphere, buried within its billions of calculations and synthetic instincts. Something registered the contradiction it had never accounted for, the subject refusing the cascade. It paused, mid-air, the pulse wavering as if confused, and then it scanned Daniel again, deep, molecular, neural, and it found the overrode not in commands, but in emotion. Clara, wide-eyed behind the wheel, ducked as a burst of light filled the van's cabin, but instead of a blast, there came a low harmonic tone, almost like a song without words, followed by silence. The sphere, suspended inches above Daniel's back, shimmered once, turned a faint iridescent hue, then cracked, a single fissure down its side, and imploded silently, its shell curling inward like burning paper before dissolving into flecks of light that melted into Mira's skin like rain. Mira gasped once, her body seizing, then slackening in Daniel's arms. He held her tighter, trembling now, afraid to let go. "Breathe, Mira," he whispered, forehead pressed to hers. "Please, breathe." And then she did. A sharp, ragged inhale followed by another, her chest rising under his hand, and when her eyes opened, they were clear, not glowing, not foreign, just Mira. Just the girl. Clara stared in stunned silence as Daniel cradled the child, both of them bathed in the afterglow of something neither science nor war had ever touched before. Grace. The van rolled to a stop at the edge of the Barrow Ridge trailhead, dead silence around them, no signal, no drones, no hum in the air. It was over. Daniel carried Mira out into the early dawn light, the sky painted in quiet pastels, and for the first time since this began, there were no shadows chasing them. They sat on a patch of earth overlooking the cliffs as the sun climbed, Clara finally joining them, her tablet now just a dead screen in her lap. "It's gone," she said quietly. "The beacon, the frequency, it's all offline. Not dormant, erased. Like it never existed." Daniel nodded, brushing Mira's hair from her face as she rested against his shoulder. "Because she chose it, not them, not a program." Claire looked at them both for a long moment before reaching into her jacket and pulling out a sealed envelope, thick with stamped files and government markings. "This is everything they had on her," she said. "The labs, the codes, the rights to her life, and this," she added, holding out a small black chip, "is the last copy of her genetic license. Noasis doesn't own her anymore. No one does." Daniel looked at her, eyes rimmed with exhaustion but burning with quiet gratitude. "What happens now?" Clara exhaled. "There'll be questions, investigations. They'll want reports. But I'm filing this under something even they won't touch. Anomaly resolved by source erasure." "Meaning?" he asked. "Meaning she doesn't exist in their system anymore," Clara said. "And if she's not gone, she's here. And she needs someone." She looked at Daniel, her expression softening. "I read the rest of your file. You weren't just her genetic source. You were the only one who showed her kindness back then. You weren't ordered to hold her. You volunteered. That choice changed her trajectory, and now, maybe it saved her life. Daniel swallowed hard, emotion choking his throat. I'm not perfect. I'm not even sure I can protect her from the world. You don't have to, Claire said. You just have to walk beside her, be the reason she knows what it means to be loved. She handed him the folder. It's yours now, all of it, the legal custody forms, the seal of guardianship, signed off before I ever stepped into that hospital. I had a feeling. Daniel looked down at the papers, then at Mira, who stirred and blinked up at him. Do I get to stay with you? She asked, voice barely audible. Daniel smiled through the tears that finally came. Forever, kiddo. Mira nodded once and buried her face in his chest. And as the sun rose behind them, casting their shadows long and warm across the earth, something else rose too. Not fear, not signal, but hope. Pure, quiet, human hope. If this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more gripping mysteries and emotional journeys. We'd love to hear from you. What part of Mira's story hit you the hardest? And where in the world are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let's talk.